The letter carried the scent of luxury perfume and deceit of fragrance I would recognize from a mile away. After 20 years of a seemingly perfect marriage, everything collapsed the moment I read its first line that morning. The envelope had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 days, and I hesitated to open it. It was just a plain white envelope with no return address. My name neatly written in feminine handwriting. There was something off about it, as if the contents were hiding. Something unpleasant, ready to spoil the anniversary celebration I'd been planning for days. In just a few days, we were supposed to have a party marking 2 decades of marriage to Jack, a respected heart surgeon whose world I had been a part of for the past 20 years. But lately, Jack had been different, withdrawn, tense, constantly, mentioning long nights at the hospital and issues at work. On that dreary Tuesday morning, as I prepared for the anniversary, I finally opened the envelope while sipping coffee. The scent of expensive perfume immediately filled the air, making my heart race with unease, even before I had read a single word. "Hello, Sophia," the letter began in neat, confident handwriting. "You don't know me, but I've been intimately involved with your husband for almost a year now." The shock made me drop my cup, which shattered on the marble floor Jack had insisted on installing during the last renovation. The hot coffee splashed against my legs, but I barely felt it. My eyes were locked on the letter, drawn to the cleanly written words. The letter, signed by someone named Chloe, recounted how she had first met Jack at a medical conference in Chicago, how he had discreetly removed his wedding ring and joined her at the bar in the Hilton. All this while, I had believed Jack was traveling for work. It turned out he had taken Chloe on several trips to resorts. I soon learned that Chloe was the same blonde woman from his clinic who always appeared in photos from corporate events, ways with a tablet, in a white coat, and pretending to be polite. She was the one I had never truly noticed. Chloe detailed how Jack had promised her he would divorce me after our anniversary, when the timing would be right. She even mocked me, calling me a cold careerist, living with him for the sake of appearances. "But I've seen your pictures on social media," she wrote. "I know the way you look at him. He doesn't deserve you, and he doesn't deserve me either." The final paragraph included such intimate details that I had no doubt this letter came from someone close to him. At the end, Chloe apologized for revealing the truth, but claimed she was doing it to open my eyes to 20 years of lies. I read the letter 3 times, feeling its words burrow deep into my mind. This wasn't a jealous rant, it was a calculated move from one woman to another. After a moment of careful reflection, I folded the pages neatly and placed them back in the envelope. Everything had to be planned out. In 3 days, there was to be a vow renewal ceremony and an extravagant banquet for 150 guests. All of our important people would be there: Jack's colleagues, my publishing team, childhood friends, and relatives. Everyone who had witnessed our flawless marriage. As I wandered through our large home in an affluent neighborhood, I realized how many times I had hosted events here for Jack's career, constantly putting my own dreams on hold. I thought back to when I had supported him through residency, when I was there after his father passed, and how I patiently waited for him to mature, to build a family. 20 years. 20 years with a man who could remove his wedding ring so easily. I fought back my emotions when I called my best friend, Olivia. "Can you come over? We need to talk about some details for the celebration." An hour later, Olivia sat across from me at the kitchen table, the letter in front of her. Her face quickly shifted from shock to anger and then to sympathy. "What a jerk," Olivia whispered. "Sophia, I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I replied, surprisingly calm. "I'm not canceling anything." "Are you seriously planning to renew your vows after this?" she asked, stunned. "Absolutely," I smiled, finally understanding everything. "There will be a celebration, just not the one Jack was expecting." For the rest of the night, I replayed everything in my mind, the subtle clues I had stubbornly ignored. Late shifts, the phone suddenly needing a password, one business trip after another, switching to more expensive perfume, and the habit of turning the screen away when a message arrived. Ironically, I, the author of articles about family warning, signs had been blind to the obvious. I remembered the small details that started bubbling up in my mind like bubbles rising in a boiling kettle. 6 months ago, I had found a long blonde hair on Jack's jacket and he brushed it off, saying it was probably from the new operating nurse. 3 months ago, I saw a payment to Tiffany & Co. on his credit card statement but received no gift. Jack explained it was a surprise for his mother and that her birthday was still 4 months away. He liked to do things in advance, but the most painful thing wasn't the infidelity itself, it was the deeper betrayal. Jack had carefully isolated me from my friends and built a comfortable vacuum around me. When I mentioned returning to journalism, he smiled and said that writing was just a hobby. But his position required a reliable homemaker at a recent family dinner. My mom noticed that I looked exhausted. Jack pulled me into the hallway and quietly suggested that we cut back on visits to my parents, because my mom was constantly jealous of our success. When I became friends with the wife of an anesthesiologist, who convinced me to take literary courses at Harvard, Jack found 1,000 reasons to refuse any joint dinners with this dangerous inspirer. The next morning, I grabbed the keys and headed to the clinic. I knew Jack would be in surgery until at least noon. His schedule was like that of a senator. He was a professional. There was no arguing with that. But when it came to family matters, he turned out to be far less reliable. Seemed in his eyes that wasn't so important. At the reception, I made my way to the administrative floor and knocked on Mary's door. Mary, Jack's assistant, always greeted me warmly, although Jack often complained that she was slow and half-hearted in her work. I never saw her that way. "Oh, Sophia, I didn't expect to see you today. Is everything all right?" Mary smiled. "Is Jack in surgery until noon?" I entered and carefully closed the door behind me. "Mary, I need a little favor for the anniversary speech," I began in a confidential tone. "Jack lost the data from the Chicago conference last September date's hotel contacts. Could you find the archive?" The assistant froze for just a second, a brief pause that was too noticeable for an experienced eye. Then she quickly typed but kept her eyes fixed on the screen. "Certainly. I'll print it now," Mary said, and a minute later she handed me a stack of papers. The top sheet read, "Hilton, Chicago. Accommodation for 2. Breakfast in the room." I thanked her, and as I turned to leave, I heard a quiet voice at the door. "If you need to talk, I'm always here." I understood then that Mary was aware of much more than Jack had ever admitted to. I went to the parking lot, got into the car, and exhaled. The first piece of evidence was now in my hands, and the perfectly crafted illusion of family life had finally begun to crack. I laid the documents on my lap, dropped the pharmacy bag on the floor, and spread the papers out on the old blanket I usually kept in the car for traffic jams. Jack had extended the Chicago trip by 3 days, although he should have returned right after the presentation. The hotel bill confirmed it. Enhanced comfort room, breakfast in the room for 2. A chill ran down my spine, but my mind worked clearly. A receipt wasn't just a scrap of paper. It was the first solid link in the chain leading to the truth. The plan was beginning to take shape. Late that evening, Jack, as expected from a busy surgeon, came home with a tired face and the smell of the hospital on him. I greeted him with a glass. Jack poured himself a glass of his favorite bourbon, his neck twisted into a tight smile that resembled a mask as he removed his silk tie. I gently asked, "Have you prepared your speech for the anniversary, or are you going to improvise again?" Jack squinted and smirked, replying, "I can't seem to get around to it. You know, I love impromptu." I tilted my head slightly, then calmly stated, "Strange. Chloe from your clinic said you spoke brilliantly in Chicago. She seemed to like it so much. She now wants to join the presidency with you." Jack tensed, but quickly composed himself. "Oh?" he asked, as though hearing the name for the first time. "Yes, the business blonde who organizes your corporate events. You know, she promotes both you and the department better than any press secretary. I answered, looking directly at him. Jack visibly exhaled, clearly relieved. Oh, her. Yes, I completely forgot she was there. I nodded and moved toward the window. I'm tired, I said, picking up some foot cream from the windowsill before heading upstairs. As I paused for a moment, I noticed how Jack, not even bothering to take off his shoes, was already searching his phone, whispering to someone in the hallway. Another batch of lies. Not for his wife anymore. That night, lying next to someone I had considered close for so many years, I realized one simple thing. I no longer feared losing him. I didn't fear being alone. I didn't fear destroying the illusion of stability. What was truly terrifying was the idea of spending another 20 years pretending to be furniture. That fear was gone, and perhaps this was the most freeing feeling in recent years. I didn't sleep at all that night, but not out of anxiety as before. Instead, the sounds of a waterfall splashed in my headphones, mixed with birds singing and soft flute music. A different reality began to form in my mind where there were no lies, no heavy glances over my shoulder, and certainly no Jack. There I ran barefoot across a sunlit field of wildflowers, breathing deeply and laughing without looking back. In that silence, under the distant sound of bells, I finally found what I had long lost myself. When morning came, everything felt simple. There was no more fear, only clarity, as clear as the horizon line. While Jack showered, I retyped Chloe's letter and carefully hid the original in the safe, just as a precaution. Then I called Olivia. Listen, call everyone coming to the ceremony. Don't cancel anything. Just say there's going to be a special announcement and make sure nobody even thinks about skipping, especially from the clinic. Are you serious? Olivia repeated. As serious as it gets, I replied, cutting the call off. When Jack left for work, I got in my car and drove to Michael Goldman, a former professor of civil law with whom I had once become friends when I helped edit his textbook. Back then, I was independent, not weighed down by phrases like, "You're my reliable support." To Michael, I laid everything out: infidelity, manipulation, shared accounts where my inheritance had also flowed, constant criticisms, and the insistence on staying home and not bothering him. Everything will be yours, he always said. Don't want to sink him, Michael. I just want to reclaim what's rightfully mine and for the truth to finally come out. He listened silently, nodded, and sipped from his favorite porcelain cup, engraved with the scales of Themis. Then he said, "Did you know Jack recently came to me and tried to change the beneficiaries on your accumulated insurance? He wanted to designate the hospital charity as the sole recipient, saying you had decided together." I immediately told him. Not without the second participant, I had to remind him it's not like in the bank, where a power of attorney over the phone works. Another blow, even deeper. All right, he continued, let's talk now about what's legally yours and what can be done at that very ceremony. By the way, you haven't signed anything yet, have you? Of course not. I'm not the type to believe at face value when it comes to that kind of money. When I left Michael's office, I didn't just have a plan, I had a whole battle strategy. Who to call, what to show, where to press, and whom to trust. Surprise! Michael connected me to a forensic accountant who began digging into the family finances from that very day. The next stop was the clinic, but not my husband's department, rather, the office of the head of cardiac surgery, Dr. Elizabeth Warren. Jack never encouraged our relationship with Elizabeth, saying she was complicated, always meddling in others' affairs. Well, he was right. I now understood. Elizabeth met me politely, but there was no warmth in her greetings, a businesslike attitude that was immediately visible. I laid before her a copy of Chloe's letter and the documents from Chicago. You know, Sophia, I've long suspected something like this, Elizabeth said, removing her glasses and rubbing her nose. Lauren appeared here a year and a half ago. Talented, ambitious, but rose too quickly. And your husband actively promoted her candidacy for the position of deputy for public relations. Were you against it? I asked. Of course. I saw how she looked at him, how they both disappeared after meetings, how they synchronously took time off. But there was no evidence, and intuition is not an argument in the board of directors, she replied. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair. You know, the most unpleasant thing? Jack recently announced his candidacy for the position of chief physician, and he has good chances, and Lauren is already preparing the PR campaign. I smirked. Well, it might be necessary to make some adjustments. To their plans, have you planned something? Elizabeth leaned forward. Let's say in 2 days at our anniversary, there will be a special presentation. Come, you won't regret it. As I was leaving, Elizabeth called after me. Sophia, I've always known you're stronger than you appear, and thank you for not remaining silent. That evening, I sat in my office, sorting through old photos. Here we are with Jack on our wedding day young, happy, full of hope. Here's the first home we bought on credit. Here I am, holding his diploma after completing residency, proud, radiant in a new dress. So many years given to a man who turned out to be fake. The phone rang. Livia's name lit up. Sophia, are you sitting down? She asked. Well, I dug a bit. Your dear husband has shares in a medical company that you didn't know about. And guess whose name is on part of it? Lauren, can you imagine? I could very much so, I replied, feeling cold fury boil inside me. Thanks, dear. This is very timely. By the way, you do remember my surprise at the anniversary, right? Don't. Forget the camera. Sophia, you scare me, Olivia said. Don't worry, I reassured her. Just be ready to shoot. Such moments need to be preserved for history. The day of the anniversary began as usual. Jack, as always, was collected and elegant, tying his tie in front of the mirror. I wore the very black Carolina Herrera dress he had gifted me last Christmas to match the status. The irony of the moment did not escape me. You're somewhat special today, he noted, kissing me on the cheek. Of course, dear, I replied. Today's a special day. The banquet hall at the Four Seasons Hotel glistened with crystal chandeliers and starched tablecloths. Guests gathered in groups, glasses jingling as waiters slid between tables. I noticed Lauren in a champagne-colored dress with a perfect hairstyle. She carefully kept her distance from Jack, but I saw how they exchanged glances. Congratulations, people began. Colleagues, friends, relatives, everyone spoke about how we were a wonderful couple, how our love inspired others, and what an example we set. I smiled and nodded, feeling the anticipation building within me. Finally, it was time for my speech. I rose, took the microphone, and scanned the room. Dear friends, today is indeed a special day when we celebrate love, fidelity, and truth, I began. I paused. Jack tensed. He always sensed when something was off. Preparing for today, I thought a lot about what true love is, and I concluded that it's primarily honesty. Therefore, I want to share the truth with you. On the large screen appeared the photographs, hotel bills, letters, and account statements. The hall fell silent. My husband, whom you all know as a wonderful surgeon and an honest man, had ... for the last year and a half. My husband had been living a lie. He had been involved with someone from the clinic, but it wasn't just a casual affair. It was a calculated scheme. As I spoke, the evidence flashed on the screen, showing the money transfers from our joint account into his mistress's account, shares registered in her name, and his plan to strip me of my rightful claim to the insurance payout. Lauren turned pale and began to walk toward the exit. Her footsteps hurried. Meanwhile, Sarah, my loyal friend, captured the entire scene on camera. But you know what? Despite everything, I felt strangely grateful. Grateful that I had finally seen the truth. Grateful that I now understood that being true to myself was far more important than living in someone else's shadow. The room was so still, you could hear a pin drop. Jack stood there as white as a sheet, trying to speak, but his words caught in his throat. Elizabeth Warren sat back in her chair with a barely noticeable smile, while the board members exchanged knowing glances. "And now," I said, my voice steady, "I want to let you all know that all the documents have already been sent to the authorities. Michael Goldman has kindly agreed to represent me in the divorce proceedings. And I'm sure the clinic's internal audit team will find some of the financial transactions particularly interesting." Finally, Jack found his voice. "Sophia, you don't understand." "No, dear," I replied, cutting him off. "It's you who never understood. You didn't realize that I'm no longer that naive girl who believed everything you said. I've grown. And you know what? I don't fear disappointing you anymore." I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the table in front of him. "Consider this my parting gift. 20 years is enough time to truly understand who you are." I turned toward the door, leaving the stunned silence behind. The buzz of voices, the clattering of dishes, and exclamations from the crowd no longer mattered. Outside, Sarah caught up with me. "Are you okay?" "More than okay," I replied. "It's like I've finally dropped a heavy burden I've been carrying for 20 years. And what now?" she asked. Now I'm going to start living," I said, a sense of freedom flooding me. We stepped outside, and the evening air was crisp and refreshing. Somewhere in the distance, music played, and the city was alive with energy. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the past lift off my shoulders, replaced by something new, something light and full of possibilities. At that moment, I realized that sometimes you have to lose everything to truly find yourself. And this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. We drove through the city, and with every mile, I felt more at ease, more myself. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to choose. It was my future, my life, and it had only just begun.